Good morning, everyone. Please come up front to the podium, please. We are ready to start. Please come on front. So they are going to pass the presentation here. Yes. Yes. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So welcome to our abstract-driven session today with the title Feminity, Masculinity and Transgender Issues in HIV Today. Although this session was asking for abstract covering gender norms and transgender issues, we have already only received abstract covering gender and social norms. Unfortunately, there were no abstract about transgender issues. So today, our presenters are going to talk about gender equity, gender-based violence, and gender norms. A quick background about the session. Gender stereotype theory suggests that men are generally perceived as more masculine than women, whereas women are generally perceived as more feminine than men. Gender norms are a subset of social norms that relate specifically to gender differences. They are informal and widely disseminated beliefs about gender roles, power relations, standards, or expectations that govern human behaviors and practices in a particular social context. Those social norms will get more complicated when they relate to transgender populations. They impacted the acceptance of transgender individuals. These norms, we call them social and gender norms, they constitute barriers that can make individuals who are affected vulnerable to abuse, gender-based violence, and HIV infection. So in our session today, the abstract we have will focus on gender equity, social norms, and gender-based violence. Our first presenter is Rufu Maswera from Zimbabwe. He's going to talk with us about gender disparities in sub-African countries. Today, he is going to talk about some insight from an HIV prevention cascade analysis on HIV negative Zimbabwean men. Over to you, Maswera.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm going to present on associations between masculine social norms, sexual risk behavior, and use of HIV prevention methods in Zimbabwe. Those are my partners in crime. Next slide. Okay, the rationale to the study is that the generalized HIV epidemic in Zimbabwe is sustained primarily by unprotected heterosexual sex. And one of the one main factor shaping men's sexual risk behavior is masculine norms that emphasize male sexuality. In Zimbabwe, early qualitative studies found masculine social norms to be barriers to use of HIV treatment service in both men and women. That is according to Scovdale. Using subsequent survey data, we found limited associations between masculinities and the use of prevention methods in men. We must acknowledge no previous studies have measured associations between masculine social norms and women's social risk behavior or use of HIV prevention. Our aim, therefore, was to provide updated estimates of associations between masculine norms and HIV risk for men and novel estimates for women. So in terms of our methods, data was taken from the Manical and General Population Survey, which was done in 2018, 2019, and the all-age participation rate was 78%. We included over 8,000 males and females in this analysis from the general population. All people were undersampled in the survey, so weights were used to adjust this in the analysis. I'm going to often talk about the priority population in need of HIV prevention, which are HIV negative men and women with one or more sexual risk behavior in the past year. Each norm was measured with 4 questions combined into a continuous variable. Questions were recorded in the same direction and dichotomized for logistic regression. So I'm going to look at the masculine social norms. Reed developed a 4-dimensional model of masculine norms based on literature review and the qualitative data that we did in Manicaland. In this model, the masculine norms were defined as follows. We looked at toughness and femininity, sex drive, social status. And high scores indicated conservative ideas of masculinity, while low scores indicated progressive ideas of masculinity. These are the model questions, the masculine norms, and the questions that we're asking. For instance, under sex drive, we're asking our participants to say, are men always ready for sex? Either they would answer yes or no. In terms of the methods, we looked at the associations between masculine social norms and HIV risk. For the sexually active HIV negative population, we used univariable and multivariable logistic regression analysis to measure association between the 4 masculine social norms and being in the priority population. For the priority population, we also use univariable, multivariable logistic regression analysis to measure association between the 4 masculine social norms and the social demographic factors, as well as use of prevention methods such as male condom use, VMMC, and HIV testing. So these are our results. So both men and women scored high in terms of having conservative views in each of the 3 norms, such as toughness, sex drive, and social status. But however, it was the other way around for femininity, where we had 23.6 men and also 13.0 females. We also looked at the socio-demographic factors associated with masculine norms in the priority population. So we really found out that men who had conservative views on toughness scored high in terms of belonging to a well-working community group as compared to a community working group which was not working well. This was actually the same for social status. For women, we also found out that women in the priority population who had secondary or higher education had progressive views as compared to non or primary participants in terms of femininity. Then we also compared masculine social names within the sexually active populations, and we found that men in the priority population have similar levels of conservative views on toughness. They had less conservative views on femininity, also more conservative views on sex drive, as well as social status. For women in the priority population, they had similar levels of conservative views on toughness and sex drive, as well as social status. They had less conservative views on femininity. So this actually explains that it was highly significant for men as well as for women. We also looked at the association between masculine norms and the use of HIV testing and prevention methods in the priority population. Men with conservative ideas on unfemininity have significantly lower odds of being tested for HIV in their lifetime or in the past 3 years. They had higher odds of having had VMMC. Women with conservative ideas on unfemininity have significantly lower odds of being tested for HIV in their lifetime or in the past 3 years. For men and women in the priority population, no associations were found between masculine norms and condom use. Our discussion. For men, those who felt that it was important for men to have a strong sex drive and or would lose social status if they showed pain and sought help when unwell, also were more likely to engage in sexual risk behavior for HIV infection. For both men and women in Manicaland, those more supportive of men engaging female roles and spaces were more likely to engage in sexual risk behavior and to be in need of HIV prevention methods. However, amongst both men and women at risk of HIV infection, uptake of HIV testing was high in those more supportive of men engaging in female roles and spaces. For men and for women in the priority population, no associations were found between masculine norms and condom use. Men's participation in community groups was associated with conservative views on sex drive and social status. These groups may be an entry point to address these views. Addressing conservative norms and social status and sex drive may help to reduce sexual risk behavior and HIV acquisition, but more needs to be done to understand the effects of progressive views on unfemininity. So in terms of the strengths and limitations, we had a large sample size, which was over 8,000, also with diverse sites from major socioeconomic strata, from urban areas, from rural areas, and also from estates. Also, the distinctive nature of the study making it possible to measure masculine social norms, sexual risk behavior, and use of prevention methods. In terms of limitations, it was cross-sectional in nature, which made it difficult to draw causal inference. Masculine norms questions were worded ambiguously. Men could have given their own personal view on each norm or their view of the broader societal position. Data on masculine social norms, sexual risk behavior, and use of HIV prevention methods were based on self-reports, which could lead to social desirable answering. However, we counted that by using ICVI methods and also re-asking questions to reduce bias. Thank you.
Thank you, Maswira, for his wonderful presentation. So we learned a lot about the social demographic factors related to gender norms for Zimbabwean men. So for our next presenter is Angela Leo Caceres. She's working for Women for Global Coordinator in Global Fund. She's going to talk about the presentation is not showing up. Okay. Okay. So Angela is going to talk about the experiences and lessons learned from 10 countries in Sub-Saharan Africa. So over to you, Angela.
Thank you. Should I use this? This one, okay. So good morning, honorables and distinguished delegates, dear civil society colleagues, and powerful women advocates and gender equality champions. I speak on behalf of Women for a Global Fund. We are a feminist movement of 250 women advocates from 62 global South countries. And today I'm really honored to be sharing with you the results of a multi-country, a multifaceted consultation we did along with ICW here present also with us, Immaculate. I will be presenting the key findings of the consultation in 10 sub-Saharan countries, but moreover, I will be presenting key recommendations on how important it is for us to rethink gender equality and meaningful participation and engagement of women in all of our diversity in the gender equality processes that we are conducting currently along with the Global Fund and the Grand Cycle 7. And I also take this opportunity to remark that we're currently commemorating the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And let us remember that discrimination and stigma towards women living with HIV is also gender-based violence. So I'm going to start by saying, and probably I would just use the stage a bit more and see my colleagues here, that despite increased commitments that we have from the Global Fund and other processes regarding meaningful engagement of women, there is still a lot of challenges we are facing. So that's why ICW and Women for Global Fund conducted a multifaceted approach consultation in order to understand which are these challenges, which are these barriers that we are facing as women and diversity in the current Grand Cycle 7 process. And so that's why we make this process a technical consultation, and we also had interviews process, such as briefing surveys and the online consultation. And here we come with the main results. Please, the next slide. So here we can see that we have data collected and gathered from 53 respondents in total in 10 sub-Saharan countries. And these countries were Cameroon, Eswatini, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Malawi, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. But this is like a part of an important process we were also conducted at global level, and we have around 23 other countries from the different sub-regions, including Latin America, Caribbean, Asia Pacific, North Africa, Eastern Europe. So this is a process in which we are working collectively, and the main results of this consultation just show that there are still lots of challenges women are facing when trying to engage in the Global Fund processes. So this consultation included some areas that we want to share with you. Sorry. And we talk about gender priorities, which are women's needs, specifically for participation. What are the things that are included and not included in the funding requests, and what are our expectations? Please, the next slide. So it is really important to remark that in the previous Grand Cycle of the Global Fund, out of 46 funding requests that were presented, only one had and used a gender assessment analysis for the proposal. And this is really alarming, considering that gender assessments are the most important elements for really putting into practice and implementing which are the needs of women and the diversity in the funding requests of the Global Fund. We know that very few respondents of our consultation really confirm being part of this process, and this is also really alarming, considering that the majority of women that we interview and we consult indicated not being satisfactory included in the process, on the dialogue process of the Grand Cycle 7. So can we just can I go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So just remembering also how important it is for us to understand which are these barriers. Some of them also included and indicated that many of these are regarding economic barriers, social also discrimination and stigma. They are not invited to the decision-making process, and even if they are present in some of the dialogues or some of the meetings, when there's a moment to really decide where the funds go and where and who is going to implement the process and the activities, women were indicated that they were left behind and that their voices were not considered into project implementation or in the funding process. So that's a real concern we also with ICW present today now, indicating how important it is not only to invite women to be part of the process, but really consider their meaningful participation and engagement in this. So many priorities also in these countries. For example, we see that there are some progress, specifically, for example, in Nigeria. We also have some women also in Ghana that were part of the CCMs. And in Eswatini also, they participate in the proposal writing, and they were engaged in the country level dialogues, and they benefit also from technical assistance provided by the Global Fund and the CRG department, but still challenges are present. And as we were been saying in different sessions also in this conference, I think it's relevant to indicate that many women participate on a voluntary basis, and they need to really leave their jobs or their daily tasks to be there. And this needs to be considered as a priority for the Global Fund and other CCMs to really consider and valorize the expertise of women living with HIV and women-led organizations. Please, the next. So as conclusions, we know that the Global Fund has made powerful commitments to gender equality and equity, community participation, and human rights. However, it's more urgent than ever that we prioritize women's needs with the Global Fund framework, and this considering the current and difficult situations and criminalization of women and the diversity. And we have concerns also about the transparency, accessibility, and representation of these community leaders and women-led organizations on the CCMs and on the Grand Cycle 7 process. It is mandatory for us to think and rethink on the CCMs we really want to create and redesign as civil society organizations, and we put into evidence how important it is for us to advocate with data, with information collected from the ground, as we did together with ICW. Clear and transparent decision-making procedures are really important, and we need to enhance the accessibility for all and broaden this representation across all the stages of engagement, because they are really essential to ensure effective participation and to elevate women's perspectives. We really also must address the cycle where the lack of influence of accountability in prioritization processes has led to underfunding women-led organizations and women and transformative gender actions in the national levels. So we really need to focus and see how can we transform data we collect from the ground into actions, into powerful actions to have gender equality, not only in the Global Fund, but in the national responses to HIV, tuberculosis, and also malaria. The next one, please. And final recommendations. Also, we know that there are many challenges, but we encourage to think and use the information provided and gathered by civil society organizations and women-led organizations to really advocate with evidence-based information. We need to ensure meaningful participation of women living with HIV in all the stages of the Global Fund processes, and this includes promoting and funding gender assessments in the different countries, and use these elements and tools for programming, implementation, and also evaluation of how we are doing and how we're going with the processes at the national level. We also need to empower networks of women living with HIV, so we use this information for priority interventions and support gender transformative actions and initiatives. We need to strengthen women's representations and voice within the Global Fund's country coordinating mechanism, but we need to reshape, we need to rethink, and collectively we need to shape the CCMs we really want for our future, considering that women-led organizations and women in diversity sometimes, and most of the times, as we have seen in the consultations, are left behind. And more research is needed. So we call on stakeholders and other actors to support this kind of research and use the information and the data that we already have and produce a bit more of them, so we can collectively have information that can produce changes for gender equality, and as we say, also leave no one behind. I thank you very much for the opportunity of being here, and I leave the floor to the next panelist.
Thank you, Angela, for sharing with us the experiences and issues related to gender equity in 10 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. So our last presenter is Ms. Gloria Blessing from the National Agency for the Control of AIDS in Nigeria. She is an activist, Gloria, because she contributed and participated in the passage of the Anti-Stigma and Discrimination Act for people living with HIV in Nigeria. She's very passionate about, the issue of women living with HIV in West Africa. She also does media talks and campaign. So today she's going to talk about gender-based violence in Northeast Nigeria. Over to you, Blessing.
Good morning, everyone. My name still remains the same, Gloria Blessing Asuko. I'm talking about the gender-based violence in Northeast Nigeria. Based on the time given to me, I will try to manage the time. These are the presentation outline, and this is the background. Let me just read through on this. Over the past 5 years, the Northeast region of Nigeria has experienced continuous harm assaults, leading to a significant rise in the number of internal displaced persons. Current estimates according to UNFPA Nigeria indicate that more than 2 million IDPs reside in the northeast part of the country, earlier in camps or within host community. This study aims to explore the prevalences, partner, documented, and social norms related to sexual and gender-based violence. Then coming to sexual and gender-based violence, based on the UN definition, this is what it means that gender means committed against person because of his or her sex or gender. Then the second outline said it is forcing another person to do something against he or her wish. Then here are the prevalent outline that says 35% of women worldwide have experienced either physical and or sexual, intimidate partner violence or non-partner sexual violence. Then here is talking about 1 in 3 persons, in 3 women has experienced physical or sexual violence. While another is saying 7% women have been sexually assaulted by someone other than a partner. You can understand that in this area, we are talking about rape on rape cases. Then 3.7% violence against women is estimated to cost country up to 3.7% of, or more than double what most governments spend in economic. Let me leave that to rush to this place that says violence against women and girls in Nigeria. In all of the study, there is a reference center boarding where this intervention was made, the analysis was carried and breaking down, and not just that, UNFPA, we are in the board, UN Women, and also the ICW team, we are also in part of this survey. Then coming to silence culture. The silence surrounding sexual violence in Northeast Nigeria makes it difficult to investigate and prosecute rapes in an environment of violent conflict. What this thing is trying to say, sometimes our parent sector also contributed to the problem, where you see young person that has been raped and trying, or even the uncle, the aunties, trying to come to you to complain. Well, don't say it. You are disgracing the family, or you just want to expose the family. Then coming to the shame, as if you are making shame, because those people in question has been violated. Their mental health, their physical being is not normal anymore, because they have serious nightmare when anytime they remember this, become a problem, become psychological issues altogether. Then let me rush to this implication of XGBV for survivor. The sociological effects of sexual gender-based violence include illness, as I earlier said, even death. Sometimes they feel like committing suicide. They don't feel like belonging to the society. The stigma, the trauma that comes around it. Unwanted pregnancies also lead to unwanted pregnancy that may end in death. They will think of doing abortion, committing all kinds of crime. Then psychosocial support. After this incident, what happened? Where are we coming in to help these people that is being affected? They need social support. They need social support. They need their mental health to be settled, because sometimes it brings them down. It's not just like, this is me, this is who I am. So these people needed help. After the violence, what more? What next? That is the question. Then, the methodology. This study employs a mixed factor approach using survey and focus group to assess the prevalence, nature, and constituency of sexual gender-based violence. Multi-state cluster simply method was used to select 4,668 participants from IDP camp. These people that was used to carry out the study were people in the IDP camp. There was a project then far back that was supported by Robert Carr. Some of us were picked, and the main factor for this was to measure the people that is being sexual violent at the IDP camp due to insecurity issues. Then secondly, they selected those people in that camp to carry out the survey, because sometimes you don't just have to go and bring somebody in to carry out this program, because you don't understand their issue. Them staying there, they understand what it's all about with them, but they are free to talk to their own peer at the IDP camp. Then the results. Finding from the study revealed that half of the women who participated in the study were within the age of 20 to 39 years in all the Northeast states. Also, approximately 1/3, 7.7% of this study participated experienced sexual violence, while 3.7% reported physical violence. About 3 in 10 individuals are faced with social economics or emotional violence, and about half were subjected to harmful traditional practice. Now, when we talk about traditional practice, especially the women, we have what we call the genotype mutilation, which you see that they will tell you that as a woman in some part of the state, as a woman, that if they didn't circumcise you, that means you will become prostitute. So at that point, the mentality is for the woman to be circumcised so that they will not be prostitute, so that they will not be practicing prostitute. And this happens in some of the states in Nigeria. Borno State has the highest, which happens to be 16.5%, instead of sexual and emotional violence, while the prevalence of physical violence varies significantly among states, with Borno, Yobe experienced over a quarter of reported cases, and Adamawa, Gombe having around 10. Then, these are the recommendations that come with the UN 8 key intervention to prevent and respond to violence against women and girls should be fully implemented in Nigeria. 1, strengthening multi-sectoral response mechanism, adopting a survivor-centered approach. 2, advocating on survivor-centered approach. 3, access to information 24/7. That is on and on. Anytime the information is there for anyone to pick up phone and call. I have been violated. Where can I get ABCD services? Then coming to focus on violent community level. promote livelihood and economic empowerment opportunity for GBV survivor. Sometimes these people are just less privileged, especially coming to the women's side. Sorry, I'm talking about women because women are more vulnerable to all of this. So coming to the women's side, the woman is just at home. There is what we call the housewife. He's just there. He's not doing anything. So she depends more on the man. So anytime the man says something against her wish, she has to do. She has to succumb. But what we are trying to bring out there, this woman should be empowered in terms of economic factor. Give her something that she will do. She becomes self-independent and also have her own self-esteem. Then engage and advocate for private sectors. We have what we call the trust fund, where the private sector comes in and deliberate on this, on how to support the victims that are being violated by one of these people around. Then this study underscored the urgent need for effective and coordinate intervention to address sexual gender-based violence in Northeast Nigeria. There should be an increased collaboration among stakeholders, improve awareness and education efforts, and targeted capacity building for local organizations. Also, the government can address this through legal reform and the promotion of gender inequality. Then these are the reference. To summarize all of this, I think I handled a case that happens to a 3-year-old child. The 3-year-old child was raped by a 30-year-old man. So it was not an easy thing. When we tried to intervene in that case, the mother came up and said, "No, don't. My daughter is still young. What happens to her future? What happened? Will she get married? Don't video her. Don't snap her. Don't." A lot of don't. But thank God for the government, for the law enforcement agency that just sweep into action and said, "No, you can go and settle the case with the other people. But you see, this child is a government child. So she's underage and her right is being violated." And as I speak, the man is resting in one of the prison in Nigeria. So coming to that, we have a lot of success when it comes to this. So we need this intervention by the UN Women, by the UNFPA, and the government as a whole to see that things of sexual gender-based violence is being eradicated in the whole of Africa. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Blessing, for this, really wonderful and informative presentation. So we want to thank all the presenters here for their presentations about gender equity, social norms, and also gender-based violence. I don't know if we can have 1 or 2 questions from the audience before closing this today. So any question or comment? So if not, let's thank the presenters for their presentations and for their contribution to the ICASA this year. Thank you, Angela.
Should we take a good picture before?
Of course.
Hello. Yeah, now we are calling the next session is E1. We are calling on the podium the moderator and the speaker for the next session are here. Okay, please. The next session is building country level capacity for quality improvement. Abstract driving station, please have a seat. We are looking for the moderator. The moderator for the next session, E1. Please, can you come in here? No, sit down very well. Don't sit here. You are the interpreter. Okay. Sir, you have your presentation? Yeah. You have uploaded it on the faculty? No. If you have not updated on the faculty, how do you want to do that? We sent you. Who was I supposed to be? No, we sent you communication that you should upload everything at the faculty, and we direct to the faculty. To be tough for you. Okay. So who can I see? Go down there first, at the back there. Where? At the back. Yeah. Where you have people with. Yes, okay, go down there first. Huh? Yes, we have you have the floor. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Our session is apôtre. Qu'est-ce qu'il faut? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Our session is about building country-level capacity for quality improvement. We have three interesting topics. Okay, my name is Frank Fwamba from WHO. I'm the moderator of this session. I say that this session is about building country-level capacity for quality improvement. We have three interesting topics. The first is about addressing equity issues, service access in complex environments, the case of South Sudan with Mr. Moses. The second topic is about development of sustainability and transition framework for HIV, STI, and TB program in South Africa with Dr. Rogerio. What is Dr. Rogerio? Okay. And the last one is about coordination, implementation, science for injectable cabotegravir for PrEP. As I said, for the first presentation, the speaker is Mr. Moses Gala of Intra Health International. Mr. Moses is an older bachelor in public health. He has a diploma in project management
in clinical medicine and community health. You have more than 10 years experience in HIV AIDS. Mr. Moses, you have the floor for 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to share experience on addressing equity issues for HIV services access in a complex environment, the experience of South Sudan. Next slide, please. Do you have some technical challenges? Yes, this one here. Apologies for those hiccups. Next slide, please. Yeah, in terms of our presentation outline, we are going to look at the background, project scope, methodology, the package of intervention with interest the female sex workers, results, lesson learned, challenges, and way forward. In informal background, South Sudan as a country has an estimated population of 12 million, with the estimated people living with HIV at 164,000. As of 2022, we have 52,692 persons that are on antiretroviral therapy. The gap tells us the existing inequities. And as a country, the HIV epidemic is generalized with significant variation within and among the states and also among the subpopulations. Previous biobehavioral surveillance surveys that were conducted with support from CDC Ministry of Health through Intra-Health, in select towns within the Republic of South Sudan, puts the HIV prevalence among the female sex workers at 23%, compared to the general population prevalence of 2%. Today, as countries are celebrating gains in realizing the achievement of the 95 UNAIDS global target, countries like Zimbabwe, Botswana, but South Sudan as a country still lags behind. In terms of progress, the first 95 is at 40%, the second is at 32%, and the third is at 27%. The country had experienced double shocks of conflict, 2013 and 2016. The environment still remains fragile, and it lacks basic infrastructure, with many families living below the poverty line. The socioeconomic environment makes women very vulnerable, and this contributes to engagement in sex work. Like other countries, sex work in South Sudan is illegal, and it attracts sociocultural condemnation within and among communities. And that alone means that sex work criminalization, arrest, and money extortion exist within and from the authorities within the country, including gender-based violence, and that widens the inequity issues. Next slide. At a project level, Intra-Health International is privileged with support from USAID to implement a project called Advancing HIV/AIDS Epidemic Control, targeting general population and key population. And the key population in this aspect, based on the context, looks at the female sex workers and their clients. And the project level, looking at the HIV, general HIV service intervention, it is in 14 primary healthcare facilities. 10 of those facilities are in one of the counties within one state, and 4 of those facilities are in 2 of the counties within one state, that is Western Equatorial State. For the KP project activities, it is implemented in 6 towns of the 10 states of the Republic of South Sudan. And within the 6 sites or 6 towns, we have an estimated population of the female sex workers at 12,715. This is based on the micro-planning data that is conducted annually by the project teams. Looking at the context in an environment where no drop-in centers are allowed to cascade or implement HIV intervention for key population, you are only allowed to do integration to the existing public health facilities. How do you navigate? The navigation is in the sense that we do targeted community-based interventions to the female sex workers. You identify and train them as peer educators and peer navigators to at least mobilize and make sure that they refer their peers to the establishments when outreaches are organized. And we continue to conduct biannual key population hotspot mapping to at least provide for us a denominator to leverage our planning intervention for the outreach intervention. And equally at leadership level, we engage with the South Sudan AIDS Commission through the national security to secure letters of authorization as a means of community entry process, alongside doing advocacy to make sure that the leadership comes to terms to understand the epidemic situation within the country and try to see what best can be done to the subpopulation that may be at elevated risk of the infection. Equally, in our intervention, we make sure that we provide comprehensive services integrating sexual and reproductive health and HIV services, And also we review to make sure that we really understand in terms of scale. How are we doing in our intervention? And in the scope of this presentation, we are looking at 1 year event of our programming. Next slide. The package of the intervention that we provide is aligned to the WHO recommendation of the behavioral, biological, and the structural intervention to make sure that the interventions are handy and to meet the needs of the female sex workers where they stay at their convenience. Next slide. Looking at the results within that 1 year, as I mentioned, we don't have drop-in centers. The interventions are planned in a way that you work alongside the public health facilities for aspect of bio-referrals, community facility level to enhance appropriate linkage. And that comes with a lot of challenge. But we are here to really pronounce and make sure that based on the complexity of the environment, we are able to test 8,877, and we identified 761 positive, putting a positivity rate of 8.5%. And looking at quarterly trends, the quarterly trends stand up at above 9%. And that tells us in terms of what we really need to be different to make sure that nobody is left behind. Equally, in terms of linkage, we make sure that all those who have been identified HIV positive are linked from the facility. We work alongside the facility teams to make sure that they are initiated on ART on site and supported to make sure that they continue with their refills at the facility level. And the team continues to engage in terms of good coordination and collaboration to make sure that the HIV cascade is enhanced in terms of appropriate linkage, retention, viral load services, and also the psychosocial support. At program level, we also try to engage and try to see in terms of the positivity, which age categories are at higher risk, so that in terms of our intervention, we can really plan and cascade our interventions appropriately in terms of service provision. Next slide. This demonstrates aspect of comprehensiveness of the service. When you are going to the community, you don't only go and provide HIV testing. You need to look at the other package to make sure that STI screening, family planning, gender-based violence, including the new PrEP interventions are provided. And this shows the comprehensiveness, regardless of absence of centers that may be there at the community, but you navigate to make sure that the bilateral referral community facility is enhanced so that at least the services are comprehensive and those in need of the services are provided when and where they need them. Next slide. In terms of lessons learned, we learned that provision of services on site at the community level is visible and cost effective, and usage of peers is very successful in increasing reach to the target population. And equally, we need to really leverage and make sure that we fully integrate our services to make sure that community facility bilateral referral is enhanced in terms of system, and we need not to forget that engagement with the national security leadership is very key alongside advocacy with the key government authorities to really sustain our efforts in the intervention. We have challenges. Flooding, insecurity, accessing the sites becomes a nightmare. And this contributes to issues related with the stockouts of drugs, mobility of the female sex workers, and sometimes they move to sites where we don't have presence. And that becomes very difficult because where they are, interventions may not be provided. And equally, the conflict zone poses a huge kind of threat. And as I mentioned, absence of drop-in centers that other countries are benefiting because it provided easy service intervention misses. And for us as a country, we try to leverage on what is available because we know that you need to invest on what is available and try to make sure that you build your resources on it. Next slide. In terms of conclusion, we learned that capitalizing on program synergies can produce the best possible HIV outcome. And equally, we need purposeful leadership direction. With that purposeful leadership direction in terms of engagement, it becomes a nightmare in terms of issues related with violence. And we also know that research, program reviews is very important to inform. Not only doing research, not only doing program reviews, but actualizing the data to make sure that the data is used handy to inform program implementation. Next slide. Next slide, please. I thank you so much, and allow me appreciate the leadership of the Republic of South Sudan, Ministry of Health, South Sudan AIDS Commission, PEPFAR through USAID for supporting intra-health to make sure that activities are implemented to the vulnerable population amidst the existing challenges within the country. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moses. With Moses, we have seen now it is possible to have many and better achievements regardless of the context. Everyone knows the context of South Sudan. The second speaker is Dr. Ruggiero. We'll talk about development of national sustainability and transition framework for HIV, STI, and TB program in South Africa, a multi-sectorial approach. Dr. Ruggiero is the executive manager of resource mobilization and donor coordination at the SANAC. He possesses several qualifications, including master's degree in health promotion and PhD in public health from University of KwaZulu-Natal. He has more than 20 years experience in various aspects of HIV, TB, and STI management. Dr. Ruggiero, we have 10 minutes.
No, thank you very much, Program Director. So I will try to rush through the slides to cover the 10 minutes. Good morning, colleagues. So I'm going to be presenting to you what we regard as a best practice in terms of the development of a country-level plan for sustainability of donor-funded programs in South Africa. So in the next slide, the program director has already indicated that I come from NEC in South Africa, which we call SANAC. It is the same version of NEC that exists in the other countries. Just to say that the SANAC was formed by a cabinet sometime in early 2000 to drive the multi-sectoral coordination of the HIV, TB, and STI response in the country, in line with what we know as UNH 3.1's principle that prescribes that countries should have an agreed HIV and AIDS action framework through one structure and with one M&A system, so one coordination body as well as one M&A system, and in South Africa that occurs through SANAC. And there's already evidence that without this structure, the implementation of the programs in the country would have been fragmented, and there would have been no room for participation of stakeholders like civil society and the private sector in a coordinated fashion. The next slide. I'm not going to dwell into it, but it just explains how the next structure works in the country, that it's chaired at the highest level by the Deputy President of the country and through an extended plenary that consists of government stakeholders, civil society, and the private sector. And there are some subcommittees that work under that structure. For example, the Resource Mobilization Committee, as well as other committees like Program Review committees. The same structure is replicated at sub-national level or provinces, where the Provincial Council on AIDS are the ones that drive it with the premiers of the provinces, and the chairing happens with the civil society leadership. The structure is supported by a secretariat, which is where I come from, that provides the secretariat function to the SANAC structure. So with the issue at hand today, why do sustainability planning? And we present here the proposed format that we had followed. Part of the work of SANAC on NEC is to develop the National Strategic Plan for HIV and AIDS and TB. At this stage, we are implementing the NSP, if I can abbreviate it, NSP, for 2023 to 2028 with 4 goals. And one of those goals, which is goal number 4, already prescribed that the country should be regularly developing sustainability and transitional plans that are routinely monitored to ensure that we maintain the programs that we offer, especially the ones that are funded by the donors post the donor transition. Why then would you have a framework to guide that? It is because many people interpret sustainability issues differently. So if you have a country level framework, then you have a structured approach of engaging on a broad range of sustainability topics. You build a common understanding of the interpretation of the sustainability issues so that everybody talks about the same thing when they refer to sustainability issues for the HIV and TB programs in the country. The risks that we had identified for us to have a framework was that we noticed that for some of the programs, especially the prevention ones, there was a high dependence on the donor funding. Some programs almost exclusively funded by the donors. An example of that will be the pre-exposure prophylaxis, as well as the VMMC program at the time, which had, although there was government funding, but it was at a limited scale. And also there's a question of the insufficient domestic funding that was not allocated towards the HIV programming in the country. And with the dependence on the donors for some of the programs, there needs to be a guidance document for the domestic funding, as well as other donors in terms of what are the key things that they need to do if they come and implement programs in the country. And we also know that some of the programs were delivered in a vertical fashion in the country. Even the ARV treatment is one of them. The prevention of mother-to-child transmission is another one that were implemented as a result of court action or civil society pressure. And hence there was no time to integrate it within the existing PHC services. And hence then they were implemented in a vertical manner so that there can be a rapid scale up at the time. And hence that poses its own risk, which we are trying to address with the sustainability framework. In the next slide, I think we are in a slide that says who should lead sustainability planning. So the next one. So yes, this is a big question then, because given the issues that I've indicated in most of the countries, South Africa is lucky in the fact that most of the funding for the NSP responses comes from the government. Approximately 70% of the funding comes from the government, but there is that percentage that comes from international donors, mainly PEPFAR and the Global Fund, but there are others as well. And hence then the conversations regarding sustainability, we noted that some of them were being led by the donors because they needed to have some form of sustainability prescripts in their programs, but there was nothing that the country had so that they could align with the country, and hence then the sustainability framework had to be developed. So the conversations could not be led by the government departments alone, given the multi-sectoral response that HIV and TB issues are. Although, as I've indicated, most of the funding is allocated by Treasury, you also can have Treasury leading the discussions because, one, they have limited jurisdiction in terms of the operations of the different departments, even health, as well as also for the community-based programs. They do not have much control over those ones. And most of the issues that require sustainability are social and structural drivers of the three diseases, and those have limited leadership from Treasury. Also, if you allocate the responsibility to the Department of Health, for example, that department has equal standing as other role players in the HIV response. So, for example, in our country, we also have the Department of Social Development that drives the issues that address social and structural drivers. So you cannot have one department then that exercise control over the other departments. So these, amongst other factors, then places the responsibility, in our opinion, to develop the sustainability planning by the NECs of the country, which then in our case was done by SANAC. But in doing so, we also acknowledge that you need people that have technical capacity in terms of health financing and the other programmatic issues to drive the coordination of the framework. So we then set up a multi-sectoral technical working group that was going to provide oversight in terms of the development of the framework, as well as its monitoring and provincial implementation as well, because the first exercise was to focus at developing sustainability framework at national level, but then the next exercise is that you want to also do that at subnational levels. So on your left-hand side, you can see then the composition of that technical working group that we had established, and you can see that its representativity covers stakeholders from government, civil society, even the development partners, some of them that don't only provide support with regards to financial resources, but also with regards to the technical support. I think you've moved to the next slide, which Jan, no, the one previous to that one, the approach. So when we started this exercise in 2021, because the plan that we developed was for 2021 to 2023, there were not many models that we could look at. So we started from the scratch of looking worldwide, reviewing literature published and unpublished, to look at how to develop the best sustainability framework. We also did some public and targeted consultations with the experts. There were meetings that were held with the provinces to agree on the sustainability definitions as well as the domains of sustainability, because we were clear that you cannot only look at the issues of sustainability based on the finances. There are other issues that you need to consider. So if you look at the next slide, then after the exercise, we then, based on all the review that we had done, identified 6 domains of sustainability for the country. I'm not going to go through each one of them because of time limitations, but you can see that financial sustainability is one of the aspects. We also looked at the issues of epidemic control, service delivery issues, the political leadership, all of these that we benchmarked to see that those are the components that need to inform an effective sustainability framework. So what we were able to achieve then is the Sustainability Technical Working Group, which was the beginning step that I've talked about. We now had, the next slide, the National Sustainability Framework for 2021 to 2024, which also included tools that were going to be used by the provinces in terms of developing their own local sustainability and transitioning planning, which is a process that I've indicated is driven at subnational level by the Provincial Council on AIDS. So we also manage in the new National Strategic Plan to include a sustainability chapter so that the country is guided in terms of what is it that they need to do when doing HIV and TB programming to include the issues relating to sustainability. In red there, we've indicated the 2 indicators that are defined in terms of the NSP for monitoring the sustainability progress in the country. I'm going to skip the next slide and move to the one to the next one. The one that says sustainability planning. That one, yes. Just to briefly explain then that it's all well and good to have the plan, a well-consulted plan. Everybody has buy-in terms of the plan, but it can easily find its way into a shelf and not being used. So the next process that we are in the process of doing is to institutionalize the sustainability framework, which means to mainstream it within the government planning and budgeting processes. So the first step we think we have achieved, because the national strategy framework has been included in the NSP, which is a guidance document for all the implementers. Then as we move to do the provincial strategic plans, we are also including the provincial level sustainability issues into those plans as well. But ultimately, all the business plans that the provinces submit to Treasury for funding of the HIV programs should have the sustainability issues outlined in them and then funded. And that is one way we're going to maintain the mainstreaming of the sustainability. And that is the process that we are currently engaging other departments like Treasury to do. So in terms of the next steps, we've got a national plan. We are busy now trying to align it with the new NSP, because the plan that we had was for 2021 to 2023. Our new NSP is from 2023 up to 2028. That is the process that we are doing. Once that is done, because we've already used the tools that we've developed to assess the national level programs using the same framework, we are going to move that process now to the provinces, to have all the 9 provinces having their own sustainability plans, as well as the transitioning plan in terms of withdrawal or reduction of donor funding in the main. But we must also indicate that part of the exercise is to ensure that there are regular assessment of the sustainability issues, because those change from time to time. We saw even during COVID how the donor priorities changed. Some of the programs that had been funded had to be reprioritized to cover, to mitigate the COVID implications. Hence, then you cannot have a static framework. It needs to be updated from time to time. So in conclusion, we are saying that utilizing the multi-sector technical working group is an ideal way of achieving an inclusive sustainability framework for donor funding in the country, as well as for government-led programs. But you need technically able members to ensure that the plan is developed and that there are regular assessments that are done. And you require similar structure and arrangements at sub-national level. And we advocate that for the countries that have got the sub-national NECs, that process is better led through those structures. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Rogério. Dr. Rogério was sharing about how we can integrate in the same framework HIV and tuberculosis service and obtain encouraging results. The last presentation is about coordination implementation science for injectable cabotegravir for PrEP. The speaker is Catherine Verde. Catherine Verde is a program manager of the product introduction and access team at AVAC. Prior to joining AVAC, Catherine worked for MSC, and she provides direct technical support across more than 20 countries in Africa and Asia. Catherine, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine Verde Hashim. As mentioned, I'm program manager at AVAC, and today I'm going to be presenting on coordinating implementation science for CAB for PrEP, BioPEC's implementation study tracker. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'll start with some context. What is cabotegravir and why is a study tracker needed? Cabotegravir, or CAB for PrEP, is a 2-month intramuscular injection developed by ViiV Healthcare. The HIV Prevention Trials Network 083 and 084 studies found it both safe and effective as HIV prevention for adult cisgender men and women and transgender women, leading to approval by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration in December 2021 and by 11 additional countries and the European Medicines Agency as of December 2023. You can see here a map showing in green where CAB for PrEP is approved and in blue where there are submissions pending. And it's important to clarify that just because a local regulator has approved a product does not mean it's available to users yet. Implementation research projects are underway to assess the delivery and uptake of CAB for PrEP in real-world conditions across diverse populations, including populations not included in the original trials, such as pregnant and lactating people and transgender men. To support a successful scale-up, BioPIC is coordinating across implementing partners to address research gaps, avoid duplication, promote cross-learning, and incorporate lessons from oral PrEP. Next slide, please. So what is BioPIC? BioPIC was formed in response to a problem, the inefficient rollout of oral PrEP. The introduction and scale-up of oral PrEP was hindered by lack of coordination, slow regulatory approvals, low community awareness and acceptance, and inefficient delivery models, which led to delays in access to an effective method of HIV prevention. In addition, post-approval evidence generation was splintered across 131 small-scale projects, many of which were poorly timed and not designed to address key decision-maker questions within a fragmented and complex stakeholder landscape. To address these challenges, the Biomedical Prevention Implementation Collaborative, or BioPIC, was formed in 2018. BioPIC's objective is to coordinate successful and rapid introduction of new biomedical HIV prevention options, leveraging lessons from the oral PrEP rollout and starting with CAB for PrEP. It regularly brings together over 100 HIV prevention experts, including civil society representatives, donors, researchers, policymakers, normative agencies, and implementers from over 20 countries, and it also serves as the secretariat of the Coalition to Accelerate Access to Long-Acting PrEP. Next slide, please. So how does BioPIC coordinate implementation science? Under BioPIC, AVAC and the WHO regularly convene partners through virtual think tanks to identify and address priority CAB for PrEP evidence gaps and define the implementation science agenda. The first BioPIC think tank in 2021 was used to identify priority areas for evidence generation, and subsequent think tanks have used this list in conjunction with the WHO's priority CAB for PrEP research list to guide which topics are selected for discussion. These priorities include use patterns, particularly focused on populations not included in clinical trials, such as pregnant and lactating populations, and looking at safety, efficacy, and how best to deliver acceptable services, demand generation and ways to promote choice in a multi-product market, service delivery models, optimal models to reach different groups, including novel delivery channels such as pharmacies, and also looking at costing of various models and delivery to various populations, and monitoring and evaluation strategies, including looking at PrEP indicators. These think tanks are complemented by BioPIC's role as a clearinghouse to track and analyze implementation research projects using the publicly available implementation study tracker, found on prepwatch.org/studies, ensuring priority evidence gaps are being addressed and avoiding the silos and duplication seen in the early implementation of oral PrEP. Next slide, please. So now let's take a look at what trends we are seeing in the CAB for PrEP implementation science landscape as outlined in the study tracker. And we'll start with geography. As of December 2023, there are 34 known planned and ongoing CAB for PrEP implementation science studies. You can see the map of studies here with the numbers on the map showing how many studies are taking place in each country. And I note that several studies are taking place in more than one country, so the map will add up to more than 34. You can see from the bar graph on the right, with number of studies by region, that the studies are highly concentrated in East and Southern Africa, with 19 in the region and 11 in South Africa alone. The country with the next highest number is the US with 6. This concentration in East and Southern Africa aligns with epidemiological need, as the region has the highest rate of HIV incidence per HIV negative population, with 1 new infection per 1,000 seronegative people in 2022 as per UNAIDS. Next slide, please. Now we'll have a look at which populations are included in these studies. Gay and bisexual men who have sex with men and trans women are well represented and included in studies across nearly all regions. Adolescent girls and young women and pregnant and lactating populations are also well represented, particularly in studies in East and Southern Africa, in line with epidemic demographics. In 2022, there were 130,000 new HIV infections amongst adolescent girls and young women in East and Southern Africa, the most of any region by a significant margin. Studies including sex workers are also concentrated in East and Southern Africa, which again is in line with geographical HIV prevalence amongst this population. Trans men and gender non-conforming people are less represented in CAB for PrEP implementation science studies, despite the known heightened HIV risk amongst trans men. And there are only 2 studies which include people who use and inject drugs, one in the United States and the other in Vietnam. And I note that no studies feature people who are incarcerated. Next slide, please. Now have a look at sample sizes. At the moment, 30 of 34 studies have established sample sizes. You can see from the graphics here that the overwhelming majority of studies have fewer than 1,000 participants. There are only 5 studies with over 5,000 participants. And in order from largest to smallest studies, these are Tete Nami Negetete Nawe, or Let's Talk, and Lapis, run by the Africa Health Research Institute and featuring 26,000 participants in South Africa. Fast PrEP, run by the Desmond Tutu Health Foundation, featuring 25,000 participants in South Africa. Catalyst, run by FHI and the Mosaic Consortium, with 11,000 participants spread across Kenya, Lesotho, South Africa, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. Path to Scale for Kabele in Malawi, run by the Blantyre Prevention Strategy, featuring 10,000 participants in Malawi. And Project PrEP, run by WITS RHI, featuring 7,500 participants in South Africa. Most of these studies plan to run 2023 to 2025, dependent on approvals and availability of CAB supply. Next slide, please. So why does any of this matter, and why is tracking this information so important? Inclusion of diverse geographies and populations in implementation studies is crucial to generate evidence on safety, acceptability, delivery, and uptake in real-world settings. BioPIC, through its role as a central coordinating mechanism supported by the Implementation Study Tracker, can help ensure research is organized for maximum impact and efficiency, and identify where evidence is lacking, to ensure that no populations that could benefit from CAB for PrEP are left behind. This is particularly significant in consideration of the current limitations on supply of CAB for PrEP. It's critical to ensure the supply available can be directed to help answer priority research questions and reach those who can most benefit. You can see in the graph here the current allocation of CAB for PrEP supply for the period 2023 to 2025. There are 1.2 million doses being made available, thanks to an additional 365,000 recently announced and committed to by the manufacturer ViiV. Of this 1.2 million, 129,000, or just under 11%, has been earmarked for implementation science studies. This isn't a lot, so it's important that it goes to where it is most needed, and BioPIC can help ensure that happens. Next slide, please. So finally, what next for BioPIC? There's a wide range of new PrEP methods in the pipeline, either just coming to market or expected to market soon, which you can see here. Over the next 5 years, we're expecting and hoping to see the rollout of the dapivirine vaginal ring, CAB for PrEP, injectable lenacapavir for PrEP, daily oral FTAF for cisgender women, multi-purpose prevention technology such as the dual prevention pill, and potentially even a monthly oral pill. As these products come to market, BioPIC's role as a coordination mechanism and clearinghouse for implementation studies will gain even greater significance. As mentioned, implementation studies provide valuable real-world data. This enables implementers to support users in choosing the most suitable PrEP option for their needs, and in establishing best practices on how to do this will increase the likelihood of users identifying and adopting a method that aligns best with their lifestyle preferences. This will improve adherence and coverage while promoting a diverse PrEP market for informed choice. Next slide, please. Thank you for listening, and I have a list of resources here for when the presentations are disseminated. And please don't forget you can find the study tracker at prepwatch.org/studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. She showed us the importance of the implementation science to contextualize each intervention using the cabotegravir model in PrEP with all of the key populations.